Dear students, in this video lecture, we will discuss about data modeling or entity relationship modeling, and we will discuss about objectives of data modeling and basic units of entity relationship diagram, and in last we will discuss about benefits of ER diagrams. Data modeling. If the application under development is data intensive or database application, then the entity relationship modeling approach can be used to model the system or some part of the system. In software engineering, ER modeling is used to produce the conceptual data model of the system. Objectives of data modeling. The main objective of data modeling is to identify the data items in the proposed system and the relationship between the data items, and to create the conceptual schema of the data. For the data modeling, the ER models are frequently used and is often represented as entity relationship diagrams, or we can say, in other words, ER diagram serves as a documentation tool. IEEE define ER diagram as a diagram that depicts the set of real-world entities and logical relationships among them. The basic unit of entity relationship diagrams are entities. Entities represent something in the real world that may have physical existence, for example, car, person, etc., or may have conceptual existence, like profession. Entity type. It represents the general structure of entities that belong to that type. It's like class in the object-oriented modeling. Entity type are represented by rectangle in the entity relationship diagrams. Entity set is the collection of related type of entities. Entity type has a set of attributes which describe the structure of that entity type. For example, employee, department, and project. The basic units of entity relationship diagrams are shown in this figure. Entity, the person, place, object, event, or concept about which data is to be maintained, is represented here as rectangle. Relationship, the association between the instances of one or more entity type, and this is shown here by diamond box. And this diamond box shows that blue car belongs to person, and oval shape represents the attributes, the property or characteristics of an entity. For example, color of car entity and name of person entity. Attributes. Attributes are represented as ovals in the ER diagram. For example, name, address, salary, social security number, date of birth, etc. There are different types of attributes. Simple attributes or atomic attributes. These are the attributes that cannot be divided into subparts. For example, date of birth. Composite attribute. The attributes that can be divided into smaller parts. For example, name is composed of first name, middle name, and last name. Derived attributes. These are the attributes that do not exist in the physical database, but their values can be derived from the other attribute present in the database, is called derived attributes. For example, the average salary of the employee is not stored in the database but can be derived. Single value attribute. These are the attributes that contain only single value. Employee number. Multiple value attribute contains more than one values. For example, person can have more than one email address and mobile number. Key attribute. Key attribute that uniquely describe the particular entity. The different attributes and entities are shown in this figure. The first symbol represents entity. Diamond box represents relationship, and the oval represents attribute, and two rectangles represents weak entity and weak entity relationship. And multi-valued attributes are represented by two ovals, and key attribute is shown here, and the composite attribute and derived attributes. All these are shown in this figure. In the figure, their employees entity, and there are different attributes like birth, b date, ssn, then name, and ADDR, salary. These are the attributes, and the name is composite attribute which is composed of sub attributes like first name, last name, or middle name. Next building block is or we can say next component of entity relationship diagram is relationship type. Entities of system do not exist in isolation, and there exists association between the entities, and this is captured by relationship type. It is represented by diamond box in entity relationship diagram. Degree of relationship. The degree of relationship can be degree of degree 1 or binary or ternary. If unary degree means that there is a relationship between the same entity, same type of entity. And binary degree means binary relationship means there is a relationship between the two different entities. And ternary relationship means there is a relationship between three different entities. The most common type of relationship is binary relationship, which specifies the association between entity of two types. In the figure, there are four binary relationships. For example, works for, manages, works on, and controls. A relationship may have attribute that is called descriptive attribute. In the figure, hours is the attribute of works on relationship type. A relationship can be between the entities of same type. In the figure, supervision is a relationship between same entity types, but in that case, the role names of entity types should be specified. In the figure, supervisor and supervisee are the role names. Next is participation constraint. The participation constraint specifies that whether the participation of an entity type is total or partial. Total participation. Each entity of entity type belongs to at least one instance of relationship, and the total participation is represented by solid line or double line. Partial participation. Some entities may not related to any other entity of other type, and it is represented as single line or thin line. The participating entity types of relationship are shown by the lines connecting to the entity type to the relationship diamond box. The connection is by double line if the participation of the entity type in the relationship is total. In the figure, manages is a relationship between entity type employee and department, which represents that some employees are also managers of the departments. The participation of department entity type is total. All the departments have manager. But the participation of employee entity type is not total, as some entity of employee type are managers. The next relationship constraint is cardinality ratio. Cardinality ratio constraints specifies that number of relationship instances an entity can participate one to one indicates that one instance of entity is related to only to another instance of another entity. For example, one employee manages one department. One is to many indicates one instance of entity is related to several instances of an entity. For example, the relationship works for is many to one between employee and department, and it signifies that many employees may work for one department. Many to many indicates many instances of entities are related to several instances of another entity. For example, in figure, the relationship works on is many to many, which means that employee may work for many departments and department may have many employees working for it. In this diagram, entity type, attributes and relationships are shown. Entity types are represented by a rectangle, and there are three entity types: employee, department and project. The attributes of employee type entity is name, address, salary, social security number and date of birth. Department has attributes name and number as attributes. Project has name, location and number as attributes. And in the figure, there are relationships which are shown by diamond box. Manages is relationship, works for is another relationship, and works on is another relationship, and control is the relationship between department and project entity type, and supervision is relationship between the employee type entity. Next we will discuss about strong entity and weak entity. The strong entity is the one whose existence does not depend on existence of any other entity in the schema. It is denoted by single rectangle. Weak entity is the one that depends on the owner entity. For example, strong entity for its existence. A weak entity is denoted by double rectangle. And strong entity has a primary key, whereas weak entity has partial discriminator key. Strong entity is independent of any other entity in the schema, whereas weak entity depends on the strong entity for its existence. And the relation between two strong entities is represented by a diamond box called relationship. And the relation between strong and weak entity is represented by double diamond box. The strong entity may or may not have total participation, whereas weak entity always has total participation in the identifying relationship, which is shown by double line in the figure. And the figure shows this relationship between strong and weak entity. Benefits of entity relationship diagrams. ER diagrams conveys the key entities in the database and their relationship with each other, and it provides the visual representation of the design. Students, if you have not seen the previous videos of this channel, then there is a link for playlist of all the previous videos.